I gave a talk earlier this year at an art fair, and when people asked about it afterwards, I realized that they couldn't see it because it hadn't been recorded, and they couldn't read it because I hadn't written it down. So I've decided to make it into an episode of this series. So the talk begins like most talks on art, in my experience, begin, which is with ice cream. A colleague of mine was planning a trip to Paris, and I had just come back from Paris, so he asked for some recommendations. And he has a very thorough understanding of Western art history, so I had no galleries to recommend to him. And he and I don't really like the same types of food, so I had no restaurants to recommend to him. But what I did recommend to him, almost without hesitating, is go to Bertillon. And he said, "What?" I said, "Go to Bertillon." He said, "What is that?" I said, "It's an ice cream shop. It's on Ile Saint Louis. It's only on Ile Saint Louis. Go to Bertillon." And he looked at me with a look that seemed to say, "In all that is Paris, you're recommending ice cream." And I said, "Go to Bertillon." And so he goes on his trip and he comes back. And he says, "So we went." And I said, "And?" He said, "We got the ice cream and we leave and we're walking away. We have to find a place to sit because it's so good we can't stand." And I said, "I told you so." And he says, "You know what you've done though, right?" And I say, "No." He said, "Now we have a freezer full of containers of ice cream with one spoonful taken out of it," where my wife went, "Oh, this is terrible. Nothing is good enough anymore." And that happens. That happens with ice cream, and it happens with art. It's happened to me. It's happened to friends. It's happened to colleagues. It's happened to clients. But the example I'll speak about it happening to, though, is it happening to my mother. So my mother grew up on a farm outside of a very small town, the same small town that I grew up in. And I don't think she ever in her life imagined herself as somebody that would own art or collect art. But she was visiting me at work one day and she said, "You know those ink drawings of Spanish street scenes? Can I see those?" I said, "Sure." Yeah, so I go and get them, and she's sitting and she's looking at one of them. She's looking at it, and she says, "I love this." And she did. And she thought about it for a little while longer, and a short time after that, she bought it. She bought both of them. She was worried about the cost, but she loved them. And a little while after that, she bought another drawing, and a watercolor, and an etching. And over the past few years has built up a beautiful collection of work on paper. And she says to me now, "You know, when I go to home decorating stores and I see these bins of things that you can put on your wall, I couldn't imagine putting something like that up now that I know that there's so much beautiful art in the world. And there's something very important in that. Because if you're lucky, and I hope that you are, your home is your safest of safe places. It's where you're most yourself. And if you place something in that environment that's made with beauty and skill and intention, it imbues that environment with that. And a dialogue opens up between you and the thing that's always open, consciously and subconsciously. And it's a dialogue that grows as you grow and changes as you change. And it persists to the point where there was a gentleman in the gallery that I work at who was in his 80s, and most of the artwork he owns he purchased in the 60s. And he said, You know, there's not a moment that goes by where I don't look at these things and enjoy them. And it's a very particular type of enjoyment. It's one of my favorite things that I have access to as somebody who works with art and culture and people. It's that moment when somebody has a thought that they've never had before, or a feeling that they've never felt, or they see from a perspective that they've never seen from before. And there's a beautiful presence to that moment. There's a stillness. There's a dignity, because this person knows that they're a better person than they were just a moment before. But there's a humility to it too, because they know, like, life's most important moments, you don't happen to it happens to you. It's what Oscar Wilde meant when he said, life is art's best and only pupil. It's not that we make art, it's that art makes us. Emerson said it too, when he said, I don't remember all of the books I've read any more than all the meals I've eaten, but nonetheless they've made me. They're the moments that in a very real way make us who we are. They're important. They're crucial. And if they're so important, what keeps us from these experiences? And in almost every case, it's ourselves. It's the things we say to ourselves, like, well, what do I know about art? I don't know anything about art. I'm not smart enough. I'm not sensitive enough. I didn't grow up with it. I'm not educated enough. And I think there are some people who would prefer others thought that way, so that they could be seen as gatekeepers to the palace that is art. Follow me, I have the key. And that's wrong. And it's wrong for two reasons. The first reason is that the making of art is a fundamentally universal human act. Every culture that's ever existed, that's continued to exist, or has lapsed out of existence, has made art. Every culture has marriage. Every culture has funerals. Every culture makes art. So, if making art is a human universal, that means the only prerequisite you need to engage with it is that you are human. And not only that, the second reason is that it's not just the making of art that's a human universal, it's the ability to engage with it is a universal too. There's a poem by T.S. Eliot called Little Gidding, and in it he talks about the genius particular to some, but also the genius common to all. And what he's talking about is an ability that we all have. And we engage with it every day, most of the time without realizing it. It's what you engage with when you suspect somebody's lying, or that you trust someone is telling the truth. You engage with it when you chose to watch this video because you felt it was worth your time. You felt without knowing. And in my experience, it's the only real thing that's happening when people engage with art. It always boils down to a very personal, very instinctual circumstance. You can intellectualize art and you can theoreticize art, but it always boils down to a very personal experience. And I found that to be true because ultimately, what is art? And always be deathly skeptical of people who ask that question, because there's no answer to that question. There's no satisfactory response that anybody has come up with to the question, what is art? But when I ask that question in the circumstance, I don't mean what is art the idea or art the act. I mean, what is art the thing? What are the things we most often call art? What is a painting? What is a sculpture? What is a ballet? What is an oil painting? What is an oil painting on canvas? It is pigment suspended in oil, adhered to a canvas that's attached to a wooden stretcher. And that's it. That's all a painting is. But what is it more than that? What is it in a painting, or of a painting, or about a painting, that allows us to have these experiences? And that's what nobody knows. But something that I've found that helps you engage with that question is from another poem, this one by E. E. Cummings, called My Father Moved Through Dooms of Love. And in it, the last lines are very famous. They are, love is the whole, W-H-O-L-E, and more than all. It's not the thing that's important, it's what the thing permits. It's not the object, it's what's more than the sum of the parts of the object. And if that's what you're engaging with, and your only means of engaging with it are personal and instinctual, that means the only people who can find those experiences for themselves are themselves. It means that while there is help, there is no guide. There's only the search. There's only the learning of what Stan Brakhage called the act of seeing with one's own eyes. And it's by doing that that you arrive at these experiences. So whether these experiences come to you through paintings or sculptures or ballet or film or poetry or ice cream, the only person who can find them for you is you. So go find them.